Welcome, everybody, to today's important webinar on protecting yourself against cyber thieves. I am Ty Philippi, your host and Director of Wealth Management at McKinley Carter Wealth Services. In an era dominated by technological advancements that change almost daily, the importance of protecting our digital assets and identity has never been more important. As we navigate this increasingly interconnected world, the risk of cyber threats loom large, posing potential harm to individuals, businesses, and even our country. I'm sure many of you have either experienced this threat firsthand or you know of someone who has been impacted by it in some way. Today, we gather to delve into the realm of cybersecurity, exploring trends, strategies, and best practices to fortify our personal defenses against this ever-evolving landscape of cyber threats. Up on your screen is a disclosure page. We're always glad to put one of those up at the beginning for your reading pleasure. But I would also like to quickly introduce our panel for today. Nick Stebner is a financial strategist and operations manager for McKinley Carter in Dayton, Ohio. Cameron Smith is a financial strategist for McKinley Carter in Dayton, Ohio as well. And Chelsea Weiss is an administrative coordinator for McKinley Carter in Charleston, West Virginia. All three are part of our risk management specialized practice group that is focused on ways to bring clarity and understanding to this important planning area of our clients' lives. Our panel will guide us through intricacies of cybersecurity, offering valuable insights into identity threats, credit fraud, and senior scams. Whether you're an IT professional, a business owner, or an individual navigating the digital landscape, the knowledge shared today will empower you to take some proactive measures in safeguarding your digital footprint. Now, it's important to understand that this topic is extremely large, and we couldn't possibly cover everything in exhaustive detail. There are the things that matter, and then there are the things that we can control. Where they intersect is where we plan to focus our time today. That focus will be on the steps that can have a meaningful impact in protecting you from attacks. If you have any questions you would like to submit throughout today, please do leave them in our chat section. You'll see that at the top of your window bar for this meeting. You can click on chat and then leave your question there. We will have someone monitor those for question and answers at the end. Okay, let's get started. First, we've got Chelsea with identity theft and protection. Take it away, Chelsea.
Thanks, Ty. Hi, everyone. As Ty just mentioned, I'm Chelsea Weiss, and I'm a member of the Charleston office. I appreciate all of you taking the time to tune into our presentation today, and I do hope the information you hear will help you to arm yourself against cyber threats and crime. All right, let's jump in. What is identity theft? Identity theft involves the unauthorized use of someone's personal information to commit fraud or other crimes. This includes stealing names, social security numbers, or financial account information. And that seems like such a small definition for such a broad topic. This is something we've heard about time and again. Identity theft and fraud is nothing new, but how it's being done has evolved, and most people have struggled to keep up with the effective ways to protect themselves. Taking proper precautions and taking the time to safeguard our private information is no different than the thought we put into security systems, installing security systems in our home or keeping our vehicles locked. The point is, we don't want malicious individuals getting access to the things that are important to us, and that could weigh heavily on our livelihood. And it's become easier than ever to fall victim to identity theft. In 2022 alone, 1.1 million identity theft complaints were filed with the Federal Trade Commission through its identity theft website. And we frequently hear about massive data breaches through the media, which could mean your information may have already been exposed. In this new reality, it's vital that we take steps to prevent malicious actors from using our personal information that could negatively impact our financial health and potentially ruin our financial life. Before we get into identity theft prevention and protection, I want to go over how it can happen. Your personal identifiable information, otherwise referred to as PII, is something you're going to hear about a lot through this presentation. And here are some of the ways it can be compromised. So the loss of a wallet, mailbox theft, public Wi-Fi, data breaches, SIM card swap, phishing and spoofing, skimming, phone scams, and malware. Now you can see that cyber criminals have a variety of ways to gain access to your PII. And as a result of that, we need to look for anonymous ways to function in what has become an extremely digitized world. And remaining anonymous will require some changes to your digital routine. Some of those changes are things like using a virtual private network, otherwise referred to as a VPN. And a VPN is going to encrypt your online traffic, which is going to give you privacy from snoopers and hackers. Unfortunately, using a VPN alone isn't going to give you an invisibility cloak. You also need to consider things like an encrypted messaging app, and an encrypted web browser, which Google Chrome is not, although it is highly used. Secure email services. Again, so many of us use Gmail because it is so convenient and we've become entrenched in the Google ecosystem. But Google keeps all of our private emails on its server, so you can only imagine the information a cyber criminal could obtain through a data breach. Check your app permissions. I think the majority of us are guilty of mindlessly accepting an app's terms and conditions. But before you do, just scan through that permissions, the permissions that they are requesting. Another thing is to read privacy policies. I know it's tedious to read through that information, but you will be able to find out what data a website or app is collecting from you, what it's sharing, and even if it's selling your information to a third party. There are several ways to gain anonymity and operate securely on the web, which will be touched on throughout this presentation. Now, let's go through the various types of identity theft that can occur when your PII is compromised. There are warning signs for some identity theft scenarios that you can be on the lookout for. Financial theft, and this is generally used to take over someone's accounts. Criminals will gain access to your financial accounts using your personal data. Then they will change your passwords or the address so that you no longer have access. A warning sign for this may be if you receive emails, letters, or text from your financial institution that refers to an action, like I said, like your password or your email has been changed, or there's a transaction that you don't recognize. For instance, we have clients call all the time and say, can you update my address, my phone number? And I always let them know you are going to receive an email and it's going to tell you that your personal information has been changed or updated. Tax theft is when a thief is going to use the victim's social security number to file fraudulent tax returns and claim refunds. You know, we are in that season right now. So a warning sign for that is if you are unable to e-file because someone else has already filed under that social security number. If you get an IRS notice or a letter referencing some activity you knew nothing about, or IRS records suggest you worked for an employer that you did not. An example would be if you use TurboTax, they have an autofill function, and you sometimes will just transport that information over, but it's important to go ahead and scan through that to make sure that there's nothing on there like it says you had a job that you actually didn't hold. Employment identity theft. This is when a thief uses the victim's personal information to gain employment illegally, potentially leading to issues with taxes and benefits. A warning sign of this would be another IRS notice about wages you did not earn, W-2s from unfamiliar employers, or an indication from the Social Security Administration that your benefits were adjusted. That could mean that you have become a victim of employment identity theft. Or I'm sorry, employment identity theft. Unemployment identity theft is when a thief uses the victim's information to file for unemployment benefits. And there was a real uptick in this in 2020 and 2021. And the warning sign for that is the IRS Form 1099-G reporting unemployment benefits you didn't apply for, or you did not, or collect, and the letters from the IRS regarding underreported benefits. Medical identity theft would be accessing medical services using someone else's identity. A warning sign for that is claims or payments on your insurance explanation of benefits that you do not recognize, and that can suggest that someone is using your healthcare benefits. And the explanation of benefits is usually mailed to you. You can also check it if you have an app for your health insurance. Criminal identity theft, that is when the thief commits crimes using the victim's identity, leading to legal issues for the innocent person. A warning sign for this, obviously, if you are detained by a police officer for reasons that are unclear to you, or you are denied employment or a promotion because of something found in a background check. Social Security identity theft. The thief uses the victim's, this is typically a child, their social security number for various fraudulent activities. This is also important to look out for with aging family members that may no longer be able to independently manage their finances. Somebody like a parent or a grandparent that resides in assisted living. And a warning sign for this is if you try to freeze your child's credit and discover their social security number is already in use. Business identity theft is when the thief uses the victim's information to create or take over a business, potentially engaging in fraudulent activities, such as posing as an owner, officers, or employees of the business. And that would be to illegally get cash, credit, loans, which is going to leave the victimized business in debt potentially. Driver's license identity theft, the thief will obtain the use of the victim's driver's license information for various unlawful activities. The fact is that there is no fail-safe way to prevent identity theft, and monitoring services only let you know after something has gone wrong. But there are measures you can put in place to make it much harder for identity thieves. Protection for financial theft is freezing your credit, and that would be with the three major credit bureaus, Equifax, Experian, and TransUnion. And that's a great tool. More information is going to be provided on that later in the presentation. We do not endorse any credit monitoring and identity theft protection services, and they are not foolproof, but they are another effective tool. And through research and various services offered, the programs that consistently showed up with the highest ratings are ARA, LifeLock, and and ID Shield. If you are looking to monitor your credit, Credit Karma is a great option to monitor your credit report without lowering your score or paying any kind of monthly subscription fee. Tax theft, that is one of the best ways to avoid tax theft, aside from securely protecting your social security number, is to file as early as possible. If you use tax preparation software like TurboTax, TaxAct, or TaxSlayer, use the multi-factor authentication. And multi-factor authentication offers an extra security by requiring 2 or more credentials to log into your account. The additional credentials you need to log into your account fall into 2 categories. be something you have, like a passcode you get via text message, or an authentication app like on your phone. Multi-factor authentication makes it harder for scammers to log into your accounts if they do have your username and password. Don't give your personal information to someone who calls, emails, or texts and says they are with the IRS. It could be a scammer impersonating the IRS to steal your information or money. Employment and unemployment identity theft are not often talked about, but periodically reviewing your employment history and inquiring about mail you receive regarding underreported benefits are the two main ways to catch that type of identity theft. Medical identity theft. Review your medical records and explanation of benefits like we talked about earlier. Don't ignore emails and mail from hospitals and your insurance company. I know sometimes we get a lot of that, but it's really important just to look through all of it. Using strong authentication, so that's going to, like I said earlier, it's going to add a layer of security to the authentication process by making it harder for attackers to gain access to a person's device or online accounts. Because even if the victim's password is hacked, a password alone is not enough to pass that authentication check. The criminal identity theft, monitor arrest records. I'll be honest, I've never thought to do this, but it is a tool that we can use to avoid that. Social Security identity theft. Secure your Social Security number. Do not give your Social Security number over the phone, email, or any messaging app. Don't hesitate to question if it's needed. If somebody asks you for it, really ask, why do you need my Social Security number? And that's often going to tell you if this is a scam or if it's legitimate. Keep in mind that government organizations such as the IRS or debt collectors, utility workers, typically they're not going to ask you for that information over the phone or a messaging app. Business identity theft. Monitor business credit reports and keep business records and documents in a secure area with limited access to those outside of management. Driver's license identity theft, protect your personal documents. It is easy, especially for us ladies, to toss our driver's license in our purse or set it down when we are in a hurry or we're being rushed. I know one area that, a lot of people lose theirs is if you're going through to get a prescription and they put your ID in the bag instead of handing it back to you. But no matter what the situation is, just take the time to put your driver's license in a safe place. It's going to save you a lot of time later. Don't carry your Social Security card with you. Don't carry more credit cards than you use regularly, or a list of your passwords and access codes in your wallet. Make front and back photocopies of your credit cards to keep in a secure location. That's going to allow you to call the issuer if a card or your wallet is lost. This is a really good one. Sign up for USPS, so United States Postal Service Informed Delivery. I have this. You'll get an email with the images of the items that are going to be delivered to you, so you will know if there's anything missing. Choose a secure mailbox and retrieve your mail promptly. Don't use public Wi-Fi for shopping, banking, or other sensitive transactions, which I know, public Wi-Fi is so convenient, but it's really important not to, kind of mindlessly just log onto those and, leave your sensitive information completely exposed. If you choose to use public Wi-Fi, use a virtual private network, that's the VPN, to create a secure connection. And then the thing that we've always been told, shred, shred, shred. And shredders are pretty inexpensive these days, a very easy way to make sure your information is being disposed of safely and securely. If you are a victim of identity theft, the effects could impact you for years. And that could be through significant financial loss, a poor credit score, significant time invested in untangling the mess that criminals have created. And it's important to act quickly to report identity theft if yours has been compromised. If you feel like these prevention and monitoring measures are overwhelming and time consuming, that's where you want to consider a subscription with a credit and identity theft monitoring program. And, don't feel ashamed if you have fallen victim to this. I think we hear that a lot. Um, it is going to happen more and more, as AI is emerging. So, reporting it is very important. And now we're going to move on to credit monitoring, credit fraud, and I'm going to hand you off to Cameron Smith in our Dayton office to lead you through the various types of credit theft and the ways you can protect yourself.
Thank you, Chelsea, for getting us started today. So now we're going to be discussing credit theft and, more importantly, how we can shield ourselves from these types of threats. There's a lot of things that you're going to hear again and again, and that is on purpose because, again, a lot of this is about just raising awareness and letting you know there are ways that you can protect yourself. So as I move through this section fairly quickly, touching on the threats, it's on purpose so I can get to the ways we can protect ourselves. So the first one you see here listed is the credit card fraud. This is the most common type of theft that we see in the credit space. And it's ultimately when someone gets a hold of your credit card details and starts making purchases, leaving you with the bill. The next one here listed is account takeover. This is where someone is getting access to your existing credit accounts. Unfortunately, this is way more common than you may think, and it does go beyond credit. Think about things like government benefits, bank accounts, phone contracts. There's many more items to list there. And what they're going to do is they're going to try to change your personal information once they're in that account, request a new credit card, add authorized users, change your passwords, ultimately trying to bar you from being able to access this account. Another type of application fraud, and a lot of the ones listed after this are credit fraud, and a lot of the ones listed after this are types of application frauds. And application fraud is ultimately when the fraudster has your information and they are trying to apply for some type of loan or establishing some type of new credit line in your name. And unfortunately, a lot of the systems just cannot tell that the person applying isn't who they say they are if they have enough information. So one of the most common would be simply a loan, or most broad, and this is applying for loans in the victim's identity. Again, in most of these cases, the goal here is establish some type of asset or line of credit, and then ultimately running with that asset, never paying that bill and leaving that on your plate. The next one listed would be mortgage fraud. Kind of self-explanatory, but ultimately the goal here is for them to secure a mortgage in your name and get off with the asset. There are other ways that scams happen in this. There are ways that the professionals in that process can try to take a profit during that application process. So again, it's just important to look at the information. Don't just blindly sign the documents and continue to lead with trust. There needs to be a healthy level of skepticism. The next one listed was something Chelsea touched on, business credit fraud. Just like you have credit and need to protect that information, businesses also have that. And there is a lot of attacks in this space, simply just trying to use the business information to establish that line of credit. The next one is somewhat scary. Ultimately, it would be child identity theft. This is not something that many people think of. And I would also extend that to seniors, senior citizens, as these are the demographics of people who don't use their credit often or just simply aren't even thinking about applying for new lines of credit. And so these make perfect targets for fraudsters ultimately to try and take their information, getting their social security number and applying for credit. And Again, we'll touch on ways to protect against some of these things here in just a minute. But as I continue forward, one of the most common items we hear in the news is credit card skimming. And this is a stealthy way for criminals to collect your credit card information. If you look at your credit or debit card, there's 4 lines that references the tap ability when you go up to the point of sale system. And that has made it easier and easier for theft to occur with your credit card information. Another form would be synthetic identity theft. This one is quite complex, but it's, again, something hard to detect because it's not always all your information. It's combining real and fake information and establishing that line of credit. But again, it still can hit your credit report and information and cause negative impact to you. And then the last 2 here, student loan fraud. Again, not a place you may be thinking about, but this is another place that they can get access to money. And you may not look at that until you're graduated from college or in the institution. So continue to monitor and watch that area, as well as rental property fraud, using fake information or fake credit information to get approved and ultimately obtain rental in that location. So as we transition into the ways that you can protect yourself, and I want to spend more time in this, the first 2 that I'm going to hit on is the monitor your credit and enable fraud alerts. And to us, these are probably some of the easiest, cheapest, and best ways you can increase your level of defense in regards to credit protection. So the first one here being regularly monitor your credit. Chelsea mentioned earlier that you can go on to Credit Karma and get this. It's a free website portal that you set up and you can get this information. There, you can also go on to Experian, Equifax, and TransUnion and establish this portals where you can also get these reports on an annual basis. And then the government also set up a website, annualcreditreport.com, that you can go there once a year and get a free report. Now, there's a lot of advertisements on that one, so be careful where you click. But again, there's many ways you can obtain this credit report. And ultimately, when you get it, you're looking to make sure that the credit accounts that are established are truly yours and reflective of the payments that you've made. And it's something, again, I would recommend looking at on an annual basis. The next item would be in regards to fraud alerts. In the fraud alerts space, there's, again, when you get into Experian, Equifax, and TransUnion, you can set up a portal. And the first thing that you can do is, kind of skipped over this, sorry guys, but set up the alert system. And this is going to notify you if there's any type of fraud or attack or anything that looks suspicious. They're going to send you some type of communication. Now, go back up with me real quick. I jumped over credit freeze. So when you set up that portal on Experian, Equifax, and TransUnion, you can request a credit freeze put on your account. What is this going to do? This is going to prevent any new application or establishing any type of credit in your name. It's pretty simple. It used to cost money. Now it's free. You just go to these portals and set it up. If you are actively using your credit, I would kind of lean towards the fraud alerts for now, but don't forget to go back and freeze your credit once you are no longer actively using your credit. If you need to establish new credit, there's a process of, again, going back on that portal and requesting a thaw of your credit. And many companies or financial institutions will just run through one of those bureaus. So you can simply ask, who do you run your credit checks through? And if it's, say, Experian, all you have to do is thaw one of those lines of credit on the Experian website. Again, as I touched on a lot of those attacks just a minute ago, all of those applications applying for new credit, this line of defense is going to really protect you from many of those types of attacks. The other alert that you can set up, and we're starting to hear more and more about this, is in regards to title protection. And you may be familiar with Title Lock. It's a subscription-based service that's out there. I see it all the time on TV in the commercials. And again, we are not advocates of these subscription-based services. But ultimately, what they're doing is they are monitoring the local county recorder's office paperwork. And if someone is trying to change your information, the ownership of your property, they have to file it at the county level. And so Title Lock is monitoring that and alerting you if something is switching from your name or your address, or your name is appearing on some other person's paperwork. What we're seeing right now is that there's a movement in the county level that these governments are starting to roll out alert systems. These are free versions of that Title Lock concept, and highly recommend that you go to your recorder's website and check this out and see if they have that. If they don't, be reaching out to the recorder's office and seeing if they're working on something. And again, spread the word because the more that know about it and that are asking about it, the more likely you can get this version or free alert system set up in your county. Again, the credit freeze and the property fraud alert, free opportunities to increase your defense. And at the end of this, you will get an email that referenced 2 of those blogs, among other items that we wanted to send home with you and make sure you guys have more details of how to implement these strategies. As we go into the next one, secure your personal information. Safeguard your personal information like it's treasure. Your social security number and credit cards and your identity, these should really be taken care of with the utmost care. The next area, of course, be monitor your statements. There is grace that some financial institutions will give you if you alert them in enough time. So you need to be making sure you're watching your credit, your debit, and your bank account statements, just monitoring for anything strange or large distributions or reoccurring transactions that you are simply not placing. Chelsea hit on this, but again, it's worth reiterating. Keeping your credit and debit cards in a secure location. I would even go as far as not carrying most of them around. If you're anything like my dad, he's got every credit card and debit card in his wallet, and if he loses his wallet, he's, as he would say, up a creek. Chelsea gave a great recommendation of taking pictures of those cards, ultimately the front and back, so that you can call and cancel those cards. I would also recommend consider only carrying the credit cards. Now, some debit cards do offer some protection, but in a general statement, you are usually safer using a credit card, as the financial institutions will give you more leniency and forgiveness there. Also, in this concept with the skimming, a skimming machine does not cost a lot of money. So if someone really wants to steal your information, it doesn't take much to go out and buy this. And there is something called RFID. There are wallets, there are purses, there are sleeves that you can put in a wallet. And what this is designed to do is break up that transfer of data through that skimming machine. Now, again, this is not foolproof. If you take your credit card out when you're standing in line and you're just kind of tapping it on your hand, it has been removed from that RFID protector. So it is not something that's going to protect and prevent everything around you. It does need to be right by that card. So changing some habits while standing in line of not pulling your card out until you're right up front is also going to increase how you can protect yourself against this type of threat. And then the whole purpose of this webinar is educate yourself, bringing awareness to you guys, because ultimately there are scams going all over, and we are seeing them on the rise. And I think we're all starting to question what artificial intelligence is going to, how this is going to challenge this landscape even more. So again, stay informed and be skeptical. If you're getting unsolicited communications or it feels suspicious, don't click the link. Don't give them that information. Reach out separately. Call that financial institution, or kind of in line with this next bullet point, know your creditors. If you don't have a line of credit established with them, don't be sharing that information. Be skeptical, protect yourself, and ultimately trust your instincts and keep that information protected. Don't just freely share that. So in closing, it is protecting our credit is a shared responsibility. By staying vigilant, being informed, and implementing a number of these strategies that I touched on, Chelsea touched on, and Nick is about to touch on, we can significantly reduce on our vulnerability to credit theft. So up next is Nick Stebner, again, going deeper into fraud protection and scams we're seeing, and again, how we can protect ourselves against them.
Thanks, Cameron. In this part of the presentation, we're going to go a little deeper into what Cameron just mentioned on educating ourselves on different scams and frauds that are out there. And for this presentation, I'm going to be using the terms of fraud and scams pretty interchangeably today. So this topic is applicable to everyone, but with the proliferation of different kinds of threats, especially electronic ones these days, it is especially valuable for our senior citizens to be conscious of. So our goal here is to raise awareness. And that is one of the best defenses, because this is one of those areas of ID theft protection that truly is under our control. We can't necessarily prevent a large organization or a bank from getting hacked and losing information that way, but we can, by education, prevent ourselves from inadvertently giving away access to our own accounts or our own PII. So part of the difficulty is that there are so many different kinds of threats, and they are constantly evolving over time. It's very hard to stay on top of them all. But at the core, they're all going to have this in common. Fraud here is going to involve deception in order to get you to voluntarily and unknowingly give up something important to someone that you shouldn't. It may be money, where someone can trick you into paying them or transferring funds over to one of their accounts. It may be information. Perhaps something that seems innocuous, but perhaps even up to login credentials for one of your accounts. They could also be after access to one of your devices as a means of getting at one of the other two things, money or information. So a fraudster could be after different things depending on the situation, either money, information, or device access. Those are three of the most common things they're after. But deception will be involved as to who you're interacting with. Because if you really knew who it was on the other end of that email, that phone call, that text message, you wouldn't give them the information that they're talking to for. So they have to deceive you about their intent and their own identity to get you to cooperate. Also, you got to keep in mind that the stated request that the fraudster is giving you is often not really what's desired. It's not really the target. So a good question to ask yourself with any questionable communication is, what exactly am I being asked to do? So let's talk through a few groups of examples that you or a loved one might face. And this list is nowhere near exhaustive, but we're going to look at these in three different groups. The first one here touching on phishing, emails and text, tech support scams, telemarketing, and a couple others. But this first group tends to be more impersonal, in that communication is often sent out to large groups of people at one time, and who gets scammed often depends on who responds to that communication. For instance, you could receive a very official looking email from what maybe looks to be like your bank, stating that you need to log in to one of your accounts for some reason. But the link that it offers you could easily take you to a spoofed website that looks just like your bank website. And when you put in your username and password to log in, those credentials go to a scammer instead. Another one that's been around for years now is the tech support call or internet pop-up scam, usually from some company that's reaching out to you to help you fix a non-existent problem with your computer or device. But the access that you give them to partake in a video call or to check out your device can often be used to gain permanent access to it and install perhaps a keystroke logging program by which they can track the websites you go to in the future and all the credentials you put into them. Very often, phishing emails will have an attachment that can install some malicious software, a virus or malware for the same purpose. Another one that's already mentioned, Chelsea mentioned earlier, is that you could receive an email or a phone call, supposedly maybe from the IRS or from a debt collection agency, threatening legal action if you don't make a payment on some debt you were unaware of. Now, as I was working on this presentation last month, I received this text message here on the slide, and I thought, great, this is a perfect example of what we're talking about. So looking at the picture there, the number one red flag when I was looking at this first text message was that I didn't sign up for text messages from the U.S. Postal Service, and that's who it's supposedly from. Number two, it's obvious in this case that it's not the U.S. Postal Service, because if you look at the top, the sending address is some random Hotmail email address. And that doesn't really compute if it's really from the Postal Service. And what it's asking me to do here is click on this or follow this link there in the middle. And while it does say USPS in part of it, that is pretty clearly not a U.S. Postal Service site. I would expect USPS.gov or USPS.com in the domain name. And what we have here is definitely something else. Now, as we look at the next group, we will see a few threats that can come up in the form often of a prize or benefit that a person has won. And often such a fraud will require the target to share bank information or put their personal information down on a form, or perhaps pay some incidental fee in order to claim their prize or their benefit. And scammers these days are very, very adept at setting up fake websites or advertisements online for these kinds of things, or even fraudulent online shopping sites. That's become much more popular, much more prevalent here in the last few years. But similarly, we can see fake investment schemes or fake charities set up. For example, some 10 years ago, we became aware of another Dayton professional outside of McKinley Carter who began selling local small business loan investments to some of our clients. And according to the complaint with the Ohio Department of Commerce, this individual did not disclose to investors that he wasn't licensed to sell securities in the state of Ohio. The securities themselves were not registered properly in the state of Ohio. And the investor funds, so the complaint went, were never used to make the promised small business loans, but instead were intermixed with the professional's own business funds, resulting in a restraining order from the court. So these kinds of things are not really that uncommon. And there are some very famous examples we're all familiar with, if you remember Bernard Madoff from a number of years ago. Alternatively, a scammer could pose as a representative of a fully legal or legitimate charity or organization and trick someone into making a payment or transaction underneath that basis. And with the capabilities of AI, scammers are able to create much more realistic and convincing appeals to trick someone into sharing information or funds that they shouldn't. So you do need to do your own independent research whenever possible before diving into these kinds of things to confirm that they are legitimate. Do not take what is given to you at face value. As Abraham Lincoln once said, you can't believe everything you read on the internet. Now, in this final group are some threats that get much more personal. And this final group of frauds involves social engineering to create or leverage a relationship with the target who probably has been researched by the fraudster ahead of time. Romance scams have been around for years and are relatively easy to pull off online. We had a client here in the Dayton office a few years ago who fell prey to one of these. It's a situation where there was a potential spouse hailing from Europe who, over a period of months, built up a relationship with our client and eventually wanted to travel here to the U.S. and needed some funds to do so. And despite our recommendation, funds were transferred twice to this person, and they never materialized. And eventually, our client figured out it was not a woman in Eastern Europe who was, in love with them, but instead some random dude in Missouri. So these things, the romance scams especially, are often kind of a long con involving multiple contacts over time and a fake online presence specifically created to appeal to someone else romantically. Spear phishing is another form of fraud that involves in-depth research and targeting of a specific individual or group. And it might be easiest to envision an example of this in a business context, for instance. Someone perhaps impersonating an out-of-the-office CEO with an urgent request to another employee to pay a fake invoice to the fraudster. Or perhaps it might be somebody gaining the confidence of the assistant to the company's controller or HR director in order to gain access to employee data or even payroll data. Someone in a high position within an organization could easily be researched by a scammer for some time to identify maybe their network of coworkers, when they're out on vacation or out of the office, how they write their emails, or how they even speak on the phone in order to impersonate them more convincingly. Closer to home, you might find yourself reached out to by someone close to you, posing as a friend or family member in some distressing situation and in need of money. This seems to have gotten more popular in the last few years because with social media these days, it is far too easy to find information on people's family members, some personal details, and whether they're traveling out of the country, for instance. So if one of your relatives is in fact out of the country, and this is posted on social media, an astute scammer might try reaching out to you, perhaps from a spoofed international phone number, and try to impersonate them, or via a text message or email, something like that. And you may well get a story along the lines of, hey, I'm out here alone, my wallet was stolen, I have no money to get home, can you wire me some funds? And if their phone connection isn't all that great and you can't really talk to them and recognize their voice, it's like, well, I'm out of country, what do you expect? It's a little harder to verify their identity that way. So while some scams are cast with a very wide net, so to speak, some others can be very specifically targeted and customized, even designed to you. So what can we do to guard ourselves or a loved one against these kinds of threats? Number one is to build up a healthy sense of skepticism. Incoming communication, whether it's from a text message, a phone call, or an email, should be looked at warily. Take a second look at that sender's email address and see if there's anything odd about it, especially if it's communication that you did not initiate and that asks you to do something. It's very, very important. Very often in a lot of these scams or a lot of these frauds, there will be some reason for urgency to entice you into the scam. It might be a negative consequence that can be avoided, some problem that could be fixed, or some reward to be gained. But many scams or frauds will urge immediate action on your part to short circuit your good judgment. Because psychologically, when we feel threatened or if we are emotionally charged up for some reason, rational thought and good judgment becomes harder to keep up. And scammers know this. So they create a false sense of urgency to get you to cooperate with them before you have the opportunity and the time to reconsider and think better of it. And in some other scams that take place over time, like romance scams, for instance, a lot of times the fraudster's requests will start out relatively small and innocent and grow over time. And they know if they can get your cooperation and your trust early on, even on small, innocuous kind of requests, very often your guard will come down by the time they start making larger or more harmful requests later on. So at a minimum, no personal information should be shared unless you have independently confirmed the identity of the person or organization reaching out to you. In order to do that, it is important that you do not use the communication methods offered to you by the potential fraudster. So if you receive an email or a text message purporting to be from the Postal Service or the IRS, and they give you a phone number or an email address to call or reach out to, you do not want to do that. You're going to go directly to the IRS website, for instance, and then call their main line. Try to check it out that way. Websites and caller IDs can easily be spoofed these days. And since many fraudsters do work in teams, it is very possible that you could be referred by the fraudster to someone else on their team to verify their identity as legitimate. So if you're unsure of the identity of someone reaching out to you, reach out to the organization or research it independently. Another one is to avoid odd payment types. Scammers will often ask you to send them money via methods that cannot be easily challenged or revoked afterward. These can be wire transfers, money orders, cryptocurrency payments, prepaid gift cards, or payment made via a payment app like Zelle. So these can be red flags if you're asked to pay a bill or transfer funds or make a donation or contribute to an investment scheme through one of these methods. That can be a red flag, because once those transfers are made, once those payments have been made and you click that button, they're very hard to claw back. Next, it's also a good step to secure as much of your personal information on social media as possible. Making your profile and your posts viewable to only existing friends and contacts could make the difference in avoiding some of the more personalized frauds like the romance scams or the spear phishing scams. And then finally, for seniors especially, it's a good idea to have a trusted contact or two, whether it's a family member or a friend, who can be called upon for a second opinion or a sanity check whenever something questionable comes up. Especially if you're the trusting sort of person, you don't always want to rely on your judgment of what could be legitimate or not. It'd be good to run those kinds of things by someone else that you do trust, who you have a long history with, to see if you're putting yourself at risk by acting on the questionable communication. So we're going to throw things back over to Ty now to talk about some resources available to you and also to facilitate our Q&A time.
All right, thanks, Nick. I'm sure that many of you had some great ideas on now how to protect your identity. That was a lot of information. However, I might guess that there may be some additional questions, and we've been tracking some of the questions as you've been submitting them. So if you have additional questions, please feel free to put those in the chat area. While we're scanning for those additional questions, I wanted to let you all know that each attendee today will receive an email with one document or one-page document of takeaways that highlight the steps that we covered. We'll also receive a link to 4 blog posts that the risk management team has prepared for you that highlight some of these important protection steps. In addition, we will provide you a link to the recording of this webinar to view later at your convenience or even to share with others. So we do have a few minutes left as I look at the time to take a few questions. So I'll ask my panelists to come back and we will take a look at a couple of these questions. So there was one question that was, how do I monitor arrest records? And that's probably more credit, but I guess Cameron, what do you think about that?
Yeah, so arrest records, obviously you can do some Google searches. I know that when someone is arrested, that is published online. But if you're going for your own information, the best method would be go straight to the courthouse. I know that you, here in Ohio at least, you can go to the courthouse, request those records. There's usually a small fee in regards to the kind of printing and administrative side of getting that information, but that would probably be the best way to receive and get your own arrest record information.
Okay. Next question, what is a more secure alternative to Gmail for personal electronic correspondence?
Yeah, there's some subscription-based services out there that allow you to securely send documents, but just kind of thinking off the feet, one of the best ways would be in a PDF, you can often encrypt a document by going into the settings and assigning a password onto that document. That's probably one of the best ways from a free perspective. Another concept would be using something like Dropbox or Box.com and sending a secure link where they're actually accessing it through you sharing permission versus actually just putting it into your email and sending that document unsecurely. The real risk is kind of that account takeover piece that we talked about earlier, where someone is gaining access into your email and getting, or the person you're sending it to, and getting access to those documents. So furthermore, I'd recommend changing your passwords. I know people hate to hear that idea. It's not easy to do that. Internally, we use password managers to help us remind to change our passwords, as well as allowing us to have complex passwords where we really only have to have one major password, which is very complex and all the characters and symbols, but changing that on a regular basis helps us keep our own information, our clients' information secure. Those password managers would be things like LastPass, RoboForm. There's many out there, but again, the document securely sending piece would probably be the PDF encryption would be my best answer there.
And if I can add to that, like I said, we don't endorse anything, any systems like that, but there is options like Proton Mail, and that's the same company that that has Proton VPN, and it's a Switzerland-based company. It's a non-member of the Surveillance Alliance. So, that is a secure email service.
So one other question, since we were kind of talking about VPN, is using one's hotspot on their iPhone to connect to the Wi-Fi a secure method?
As long as you're sure that you're connecting to your specific iPhone, yes. There are Wi-Fi tools out there that a somewhat astute, technologically astute scammer can set up clones of existing Wi-Fi networks. So if you go to Panera, for instance, or any other place, coffee shop where they've got their own Wi-Fi network, it is possible with minimal hardware for a scammer to come in there with their own hotspot and essentially act as a clone of that legitimate Wi-Fi network. And if you log on to that inadvertently compared to the other one, then that's going to be a problem because your information goes through their wireless connection. So as long as you're sure you're connecting to your specific phone, should be good. Hopefully there is a significant password to gain access to your phone's hotspot. But yes, I would think that would be more secure than logging on, especially to a public Wi-Fi.
I'm just adding to that, it's kind of a different lane, but Chelsea hit on this earlier, don't do the public Wi-Fi, but if you're traveling or you're trying to charge your phone, use the wall plug. Don't use the USB plug because people can simply program something on the backside of that. When you plug in that USB, you are sending that information through that USB protection or connection. If you're using the 2-prong or 3-prong wall plug, usually 2-prong, then that is a safe way of charging your device in a public setting.
Okay. One additional question. How can you file taxes early when you end up waiting on 1099 documents from your custodian? I knew this would get a good laugh. It's something we struggle with for sure.
Yeah, you can always refer that question to your CPA or your accountant. But I know on occasion I have filed my tax returns a little earlier in the year when I have substantially all the information that I know that I'm going to need. And you can't always do this if you're not sure, if you have all your documents or if you're waiting for a Form K-1, it's going to come later in the springtime. And there aren't really good ways to avoid that. But for instance, if I'm waiting, say, on a 1099 from my bank, I can pretty easily log on to my bank website before the 1099 ever comes and look at the interest transactions over the course of last year. Most bank websites will allow you to look at transaction history for a set period of time. And so I would do that for, say, my bank 1099. For something like Fidelity account, it's going to be a little bit more difficult because assuming you have mutual funds or ETFs invested there, their income can get classified in different ways, especially if it's an international fund. You typically would have to recognize which countries some of that interest or dividends were sourced from. And that can be really difficult without the 1099s. So, that's one of those things where it does become more difficult the more complex your situation gets. For some simple things like bank interest, I have not always waited for my official 1099 if I can get that information a different way. If I can get it substantially correct, I'm able to file my tax returns there a little bit sooner. But I would definitely refer that question to your accountant or your CPA, being the specialist in that area.
And when we say early there, that's not January 1st. That is as soon as the tax documents are available. Try to get on it right away, because ultimately the risk that we're talking about is there are people, and we hear about it, they get into a hotel room sometime in late February, late March, and they're just filing these taxes in everybody's name that they can get a hold of. So that is the risk, and the goal is trying to beat them from filing on yours. So Chelsea did mention getting a PIN number assigned to your taxes. That's a way that if they file in your information and don't include that PIN, it's going to get rejected. So there are ways to, again, increase protection, but sometime after the middle of February, once the custodians have those documents posted, that's when rubber hits the road, and we highly recommend getting your taxes filed quickly.
Awesome. Well, thank you all three for your answers on that. So as we conclude this enlightening topic on cybersecurity, we're reminded of the dynamic nature of the digital landscape and the imperative need for continuous vigilance. The insights shared by all of our panelists today have illuminated a path forward, emphasizing the importance of taking action and having a proactive mindset in the realm of cybersecurity. In safeguarding our digital life, each one of us plays a pivotal role. And you could ignore the threats and do nothing. You could start today by implementing some of the items mentioned, or you could even become an ambassador to help others around you to delay or to eliminate these types of threats. The main point, action is required to keep you and your family safe. So let this webinar serve as a catalyst for ongoing dialogue and action. Stay informed, stay vigilant, and stay committed to the principles of cybersecurity. Together, we can fortify our defenses, mitigate risk, and create a safer digital world for generations to come. So thank you for joining us today. If you have additional questions or need assistance with some of the steps presented today, please feel free to reach out to your McKinley Carter team for help. Thank you and have a great day.